This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Emerging market stocks fell from record highs today as focus turned to the $1.9 trillion US stimulus package. Investors' hopes of a fiscal boost were smothered by the prospect of stricter lockdowns in France and Germany and a resurgence of COVID-19 cases in China. Now, MSCI's index of emerging market stocks fell 0.5% on the day from record highs, but it was set for a third straight week of gains. Meanwhile, activity was pretty muted across Africa's key markets. South Africa's JSE was little changed as investors assessed that stimulus package. Nigeria's NSE All Share continues to see some bargain hunting in blue chip stocks. We saw Flour Mills and MTN topping the gainers chart today, up 9.3% and just over 1% respectively. Now, also coming up on today's show. South Africans call for the speedy acquisition of coronavirus vaccines to contain the spread. The Aswan Dam in Egypt marks 50 years since it was inaugurated. And beat-down jalopies get a new lease of life in Nigeria as mechanics show off their skills. Well, let's start off today's show in South Africa. The country has called on the government to speed up its process for the acquisition of coronavirus vaccines as the country continues to battle a second wave of the virus. Now, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said the government has already secured 20 million doses of the vaccine for the current year. The first batch of vaccines from the COVAX pool is expected in February, with the rest flowing as soon as it is available. Now, healthcare workers on the front line will be the first to get vaccinated. South Africa has reported a new variant of the virus, which health officials say is possibly more transmittable. Now, the country, with a population of 60 million, has reported 1.2 million confirmed cases so far.
People are losing their lives every second with the coronavirus second wave. It is killing and hitting hard. The government is trying its best, but from what I'm seeing, they are slow in acquiring the vaccine.
The government was supposed to have sped up the process of getting the vaccine so that the people's lives can be saved. We are always in public spaces like banks and shopping centers. We cannot rule out the possibility of being infected. They should speed up the process of acquiring the vaccine.
Well, Angelo Coppola has been monitoring this, and he joins us now in Johannesburg with an update. Great to have you, Angelo, as always. Now, President Ramaphosa says they've secured about 20 million vaccine doses this year. Meanwhile, the health department also says it will finalize agreements to buy millions of additional vaccines within a month. Is it yet clear to South Africans when these vaccines will be available, and certainly what a rollout will look like?
Look, apparently, Uche, the first batch from that COVAX facility that you mentioned just now was coming from the Serum Institute of India, and that's via COVAX, and that's for frontline healthcare workers in South Africa. It's expected, according to President Ramaphosa, to land at the end of the month. That's 1 million doses that we're expecting in that batch. And then there's another 500,000 doses from the same facility expected by the end of February, just to top up and catch any extra health workers that have been missed, and that's at the end of February. But we haven't seen a rollout plan. The DA, for example, that's the Democratic Alliance, has lodged a legal challenge to get the health minister to actually release their detailed plan. There are some skeptics who are uncertain that a comprehensive plan has actually been developed. South Africa has, of course, never attempted a mass vaccination on this scale ever in such a tight framework. The last big vaccination drive was for around 1 million people, and that was over the space of about 2.5 years. But that was done a long time ago. So we're uncertain what the plan looks like, we're uncertain about the deliverables, we're uncertain about the logistics, and there's just a general lack of uncertainty all around, Uche.
Well, we just mentioned how a mutated and more infectious coronavirus strain was, of course, first identified in South Africa. Now, in the U.S., Dr. Fauci says it could pose a threat to COVID antibody treatments. But, of course, the CDC is more positive. It says there's no evidence so far that shows that it could alter the effectiveness of a vaccine. So have we heard anything from South Africa's government on this?
Well, look, we spoke to Professor Helen Rees a few days ago, in fact, about a week ago, and she's the chairperson of the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority. And she says that the country would not get rid of the second wave unless they urgently introduce those vaccines. On the new variant, Rees also told us that many of the vaccine developers have used technology that would allow for a quick modification to tackle that variant in a couple of days' time, turnaround-wise, if it's needed. But like the CDC, she's confirmed that there's still no evidence yet that the current vaccines would be less or more effective against the current variant. Rees sits, of course, on several international boards and councils and is also a special advisor to the WHO in Geneva. Uche?
Well, Angelo, we know about 1.2 million infections have been confirmed since March. Over 35,000 South Africans dead due to COVID. So give us a sense of how urgent and how significant this vaccine is to South Africa and enabling its economic recovery.
Well, everyone will now tell us, that includes government, the private sector, labour and the NGO sector, that it's all got to be part of a concerted program. That vaccine, of course, as you know, isn't a cure for the virus. It's about building the body's immune system to fight the virus. But as in all health professionals keep telling us, it's all about washing your hands, or sanitizing them regularly, wearing a mask, and socially distancing, which is seen as the first line of defense in tackling this virus. Having said that, though, the vaccine is important for those frontline healthcare workers, and they will be the first in line to get those vaccines, like I said, in January, come February. But it's not the silver bullet, and people still need to take precautions, or they could be infected by this really nasty virus, which
Well, good to see you today, Angelo. Many thanks for that update. That, of course, is Angelo Coppola joining us there in Johannesburg. Well, let's stay in the country. South Africa's embattled wine industry could lose an estimated $100 million worth of stock as it runs out of space to store excess wine. Now, the new harvest is starting amid the third alcohol sales ban, which is threatening the financial viability of one of the biggest employers in the Western Cape. Here's Angelo Coppola again picking up that story.
SA Breweries is challenging the constitutionality of the third ban. The company says the first two bans saw 165,000 people lose their jobs, with another 100,000 people moving into poverty as a result of the alcohol bans.
We're looking at tens of millions of litres, but that's still a lot of wine. That is an issue because obviously cellars are full and people need to harvest and we need to bring in the new harvest. So we're looking at probably about 65% of the previous harvest not being sold yet, which is a huge issue for the industry because cellars have to be cleared so that we can actually go into production and we've got space. The impact's been really significant. I mean, if they say that the ban will only be lifted on the 15th of February, we will have not been able to trade in South Africa for 5.5 months of our financial year, and 50% of our business is local business.
The wine industry employs some 500,000 people with an annual turnover of around $500 million. The three alcohol bans have been devastating.
Wine tourism is a very important part of our business. Normally, Creation has 64,000 visitors a year visiting us. Well, obviously, we are at half that amount this year so far, and the impact is significant. We have 50 people that work in wine tourism in our tasting room, and we had to retrench 20 people. We had no choice to do that. A few months ago, we managed to bring most of them back on board when we were allowed to open up again, and we're in a precarious position yet again.
The wine industry was caught completely off guard when South African President Cyril Ramaphosa announced another lockdown late in December.
We had a full book of reservations until the 15th of January. And so we had to obviously cancel all of those reservations, and we've now had to cancel reservations going forward until the ban is lifted.
The wine industry in South Africa is in a state of flux at the moment, and decisions have to be made and made quickly, otherwise it's going to suffer irreparable damage. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, let's turn our attention to some corporate headlines now. AB InBev's South African division has cancelled a further $165 million of investment, and that's after the government banned alcohol sales for a third time to control a resurgence of coronavirus. Now, the move brings the amount of spending called off by South African breweries to over $320 million, and that's since the pandemic began in the country 10 months ago. Meanwhile, Kenya Airways plans further pay cuts for employees by as much as 30% after the coronavirus pandemic caused a slump in air travel. The latest cuts of 5% to 30% for workers with monthly earnings, which exceed $409, will take effect this month and will run for 6 to 12 months. Now, the cuts follow those made in March last year, following Kenya's first confirmed COVID-19 case that prompted the government to suspend domestic and international passenger air travel. Meanwhile, tech giants including Microsoft, Oracle, and healthcare companies Cigna and Mayo Clinic are now pushing for digital records of people who get vaccinated against COVID-19. Now, the joint project called Vaccination Credential Initiative aims to help people get encrypted digital copies of their immunization records stored in a digital wallet. Meanwhile, French Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire has strongly reaffirmed France's opposition to French retailer Carrefour possibly being taken over by Canada's Alimentation Couche-Tard. Now, the Canadian company made a non-binding offer of €20 per share, largely in cash, which valued Carrefour at €16.2 billion. This decision, which a French finance minister says was a final, sent Carrefour shares down 4.5% and raised concerns amongst staff over job security. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. Well, we are heading into a short break now, still coming up on the show. Smaller packaging for consumer goods and increased spending on food to dominate Nigeria's retail sector this year. And today marks 50 years since the Aswan Dam was inaugurated in Egypt.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN. Welcome back. Now, the impact of the coronavirus pandemic, rising inflation and border closures have driven significant changes in the behavior for retailers, distributors and manufacturers in Nigeria. Some of the notable changes include smaller packaging for consumer goods, according to Trade Depot, which is a business-to-business e-commerce platform for consumer goods in Africa. Now, they expect the trend, which started last year, to continue, with consumers mainly spending on food and essential goods due to dwindling disposable incomes. Spending more time at home is also expected to continue influencing consumer behavior going forward. Well, let's now take this all apart with Onyekachi Izukane. He's a co-founder and CEO of a Trade Depot. Great to have you on the show with us today, sir. Now, of course, the size of Nigeria's population and its rising middle class, that's always made a good case for growth and demand in Nigeria's retail space. So to what extent have you seen the pandemic, as well as inflation and, of course, border closures, change that reality going forward? Was the greatest impact to sales or specific retail segments, or an overall need to change strategy for some of these retailers?
Very well, thanks for having me. And I'll take that in two parts. So first of all, to your point about a growing middle class and population and what the impact is on this, I think it's important to point out that even before the pandemic, right, the growth driver for Nigeria's population has been the low-income demographic, right? And this has, shaped the nature of demand that you typically find within the retail space today. So if you look at the market, the most successful manufacturers within the retail space are, for the most part, focused on producing for the mass market, right? And you find that value brands have been the primary drivers of growth within that segment, and this is all before the pandemic. So what we're seeing now with the pandemic as regards growth is an acceleration of a trend that has been in place for several years before that, right? But now biting a bit harder. So you find even less disposable income available to consumers, and other macro headwinds that the different players within the space have to deal with. Now the impact of this, of course, has been that growth, which wasn't great to start with, has dwindled even further. But there is an urgent need for many players within the space to rethink their approach. And so going to the next bit, which is, what is impacted most, whether this is, sales, specific segments, or change in strategy, just to take them one by one. So for sales, you see an impact due to, for the most part, supply chain disruptions, right? Everything from a poor harvest arising from the situations that we had within the country, as well as other disruptions to distribution and logistics and FX liquidity and so on. But looking at specific segments, there have been segments that found net positive growth in the course of the year. We've mentioned food manufacturers, but there are also other players that you will typically not expect, right? So for retailers selling electrical appliances, televisions, ACs, things along those lines, just by the fact that people spend more time at home. Last year was a great year for many of them. And then stuff you wouldn't expect, like parties that sell paint for whatever reason, had a great year last year. Probably people spending more time at home felt a bigger need to make their places look better. So, the impact has cut across and affected different parties in different ways. We noticed that a change in strategy has also been key. So restaurants, even though they would seem to be significantly hit, quite a few of them also seem to drive decent numbers last year because of the quick switch to a delivery model-based approach. And you found quite a few restaurant chains actually doing better numbers last year than they've done for a while, simply because they were able to jump on a new strategy for driving and responding to demand.
Well, one other notable trend is that we've seen the pandemic accelerate a change in consumer attitudes towards online retail. The trend is gaining momentum, but some experts do say that online retail penetration is still expected to remain low going forward. Do you agree with this? What does your research say?
I think it's important to note that, the starting point for online retail, online retail is starting out with less than 1% penetration, right? So that's very, very, very low. And for the amount of, the quantum of change you will need for the impact to be significant is quite a lot, right? So what we are seeing is that, yes, there is some growth in that regard. The growth is not showing up because it's not showing up as much as you would expect, because there are factors around the economics that haven't changed, right? The nature of the infrastructure you find means that logistics infrastructure isn't available in the way you need it, and so the cost of distribution is still high. So even though we notice an improvement in demand from a customer standpoint, the cost of the economics really of pushing that through will always be a challenge to driving meaningful growth in that space. And so many of these efforts end up reverting back to what is a more efficient model, which is using retail stores as a hub, because then that allows you to aggregate demand for a number of consumers within one location and supply there instead of direct to consumer calls.
Now, on that note, pre-pandemic, we saw that transition to mall culture gaining momentum, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa. What's your sense? Has this pandemic halted that trend going forward? Is the transition now to mom and pop convenience stores or more informal retail setups the way forward for Nigeria and Africa as a whole?
Okay, good question. So while there was a visible mall culture developing across these markets, I think just looking at the numbers, the impact of that, I mean, again, pre-pandemic, isn't as significant as the visibility will suggest. Yes, you had malls popping up and, they were getting a lot of traffic, but in total, for most markets, they were accounting for 5% or less of retail volumes, right? So in general, with or without the pandemic, the mom and pop stores were still, the hero of the day when it comes to how consumers get their product. Now, obviously, with the situation we find ourselves in, with people less inclined to mingle in the mall settings, you will tend to find that there's even more of a push for the demographic that will typically go to the mall to quickly pick up what they want from a neighborhood store within their area. We're also seeing these neighborhood stores begin to play other roles in addition to selling physical goods. They are increasingly becoming our banks, our post offices, and just generally the distribution outlets that make the most sense for most consumers to get the different things that they need.
Well, thank you so much for a lively conversation. We do have to leave it there. Of course, that's Onyekachi Izukane. He's a co-founder and CEO of Trade Depot. Well, let's now turn our attention to Southern Africa. The chaos that ensued at the Beitbridge border post between South Africa and Zimbabwe over the festive season should serve as an important lesson for the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. This, of course, is the message from road and freight bodies across the continent. A truck driver died while waiting to get through the border post, and the incident has now sparked concerns of a full-blown humanitarian crisis at Beitbridge. Here's CGTN Sumitra Naidu with more.
It was a combination of inadequate capacity and issues around COVID that caused the chaos between South Africa and Zimbabwe. The Beitbridge border post is one of the busiest from South Africa.
We wouldn't have had to have this disaster if people did not leave the holding areas. Now, of course, we have learned a lesson that once we establish a process with the trade industry, we must believe then they will follow it forever. They've shown us that they need to be policed continuously, every minute.
Last year, Zimbabwe exported goods to South Africa worth over $1.57 billion. Its imports totaled $2.2 billion. And the plan, not only for these two countries, but the whole of the continent, is to create more ease of trade, increase imports and exports, and reduce costs. But on the eve of the landmark Africa Free Trade Area coming into place, there was clear evidence that not everyone is ready.
We hope to come up with a plan that we'll be able to work together collectively and make things work in future, because the smooth flow of traffic and people through border posts is an absolute must for ACFA to work.
It's less chaotic at the border post this week, but there are still queues. But that's also because South Africa has now closed the border posts until the 15th of Feb. Only those doing trade will be able to gain access.
So far, this time it's easier. It's easier now crossing here to Zimbabwe side. Yeah. Unlike last year, December time. This time it's okay.
This border, it's okay, but the last days it's tough to cross here to go to other side. It's a lot of trucks here, a lot of congestion. But now it's clear. No problem now.
Freight bodies believe there's so much more work to be done before the African Free Trade Agreement can be implemented effectively.
There's a lot to be done in Southern Africa in terms of border post efficiency. We are so far behind East Africa in terms of the development of one-stop border posts and single customs territories and regional bonds, which improves the smooth flow and of cargo through the borders from origin to destination. That hasn't happened in South Africa, largely due to lack of political will in the region.
The road and freight sector want cargo to have its own access through borders. South Africa is in the meantime looking into infrastructure developments to improve efficiency and capacity. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, South Africa.
Now, January 15th, 2021 marks the 50th anniversary of the Aswan Dam. It was inaugurated in 1971 by the then Egyptian President Anwar Sadat. It was a massive feat of construction that has shaped the course of modern-day Egypt. The dam's construction changed the very landscape of the country. It spared farmers from seasonal drought and flooding and generated electricity, spurring Egypt's rapid development.
It took 45,000 workers back in January 1971 decades to build the 35,000 cubic meters of rock and a loan from the former USSR of some $12 million. The construction of the Aswan Dam was the project of the century, and the people of Egypt were fully behind it. The 366-foot high dam has 17 times as much sand and stone as the greatest pyramid of Giza and once supplied as much as 80% of Egypt's electricity.
Back in the day, before the dam was built, the Nile floods used to last around 4 months, and the water used to flood the area from here to the west side of the Nile, and farmers sailed in a traditional boat to harvest their corn crops.
But it was not all good news and development. There were whole villages along the Nile who were displaced, not to mention Abu Simbel temples that literally had to be moved to be saved from the flood area that later became known as Lake Nasser. For years, the dam served as the main source of power for the country, which has recently needed to invest in other sources to meet the needs of its booming population.
Since the inauguration of the High Dam and in the last 50 years, the farmlands increased with around 4 million acres so far. The tourism increased, it saved Egypt from flooding, which is the biggest blessing as it protected towns and villages and Egyptian monuments as well.
The river is formed by 2 tributaries, the Blue Nile originating from Lake Tana in Ethiopia and the White Nile from Lake Victoria. The project ensured an adequate supply of water all year.
Now flooding is still present and we still see what happens in Sudan every year. It was the same in Egypt before the dam. We also witnessed periodic droughts. The biggest in the modern era was from 1980 to 1987. 7 dry years we witnessed in the African continent. But the Egyptian citizen did not suffer from it because of the High Dam.
In the 1980s, a prolonged drought dropped the Nile to its lowest level since 1913, and the upstream countries faced drought and famine. But Egypt was spared thanks to Lake Nasser created by the dam, providing an alternate source of water. Although the Aswan Dam also had negative side effects, it increased the salt content of the soil used to grow food, holding back the rich silt that acted as fertilizer. But for Egypt and her people, the benefits outweigh the negative. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
You're watching Global Business Africa. We're going to take a quick break now. Still coming up on the show. U.S. President-elect Joe Biden unveils a $1.9 trillion stimulus package proposal. And the United States blacklists another 9 Chinese corporations.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's now recap other headlines at this hour. Vote counting continues in Uganda following a hotly contested presidential election. Preliminary results by the Electoral Commission show longtime leader Yoweri Museveni taking an early lead. Now, with 29.4% of votes from Thursday's ballot counted, Museveni had won 65% of the votes, while main opposition candidate Bobi Wine had 27%. And in Ethiopia, the United Nations has reported that hundreds of thousands of people are yet to receive assistance in the northern Tigray region. The Ethiopian government said it is working with aid agencies to provide assistance. However, the UN has expressed concern over the lack of access to some areas, including refugee camps. And Friday marked the last day for U.S. troops' withdrawal from Somalia. Around 700 U.S. troops have been helping Somalia battle al-Shabaab militants and prepare Somali forces to take over security operations once regional forces depart. The U.S. troops' withdrawal was ordered by President Donald Trump at the beginning of December last year. And the United Nations is warning that 7.5 million people, or two-thirds of the population in South Sudan, will face acute food shortages this year. Heavy rains and seasonal flooding since July last year have adversely affected more than 1 million farmers, resulting in widespread damage to agriculture and property. And that's a recap of today's top headlines. Well, let's now turn our attention to international news. U.S. President-elect Joe Biden has unveiled a $1.9 trillion stimulus package proposal. Now, the aid package includes $415 billion to bolster the response to the coronavirus and the rollout of vaccines and some $1 trillion in direct relief to households.
Our rescue plan also includes immediate relief to Americans hardest hit and most in need. We will finish the job of getting a total of $2,000 in cash relief to people who need it the most. The $600 already appropriated is simply not enough. You just have to choose between paying rent and putting food on the table. It should be a national minimum wage of $15 an hour. No one working 40 hours a week should live below the poverty line. And that's what it means. If you work for less than $15 an hour and work 40 hours a week, you're living in poverty.
Well, let's find out more about the package from Giles Gibson in Washington. Great to have you as always, Giles. Now, this bill is more than double the bipartisan bill, which was approved last month. Give us a sense of what the priorities are for Biden that he included in this bill that have made it much bigger this time around.
Yeah, so the most recent package that we saw was $900 billion, and this is a $1.9 trillion package. But of course, Uche, it's just a proposal. It's just a wish list from President-elect Joe Biden. He still needs to be inaugurated, and then he still needs to get this legislation through both the House of Representatives and the Senate before he can sign it into law. Last time round, we had these $600 direct payments to American taxpayers. As we heard there, Joe Biden is now pledging to boost those up to $2,000 by handing out an extra $1,400. There's also $400 billion in this package to address the pretty much out of control coronavirus outbreak here in the United States. That includes $20 billion to develop a national vaccination program. Really, up till now, it's been the responsibility of individual states to start rolling out vaccinations. And there's also money for schools to safely reopen as soon as possible. Really, the message Joe Biden is sending here in this speech that he made on Thursday is, despite the fact that we had these riots in Washington last week, we've had President Trump impeached for the second time during his 4-year term, his focus is very much still going to be, his top priority is going to be getting this coronavirus pandemic under control and getting the economy back on track.
Now, of course, Biden does face the challenge of bringing Republicans aboard this plan. Many expected to face swift Republican opposition. But given the fact that there is now a 50-50 partisan split in the Senate, with, of course, Vice President Kamala Harris giving some control to Democrats, is this bill likely to pass easily?
Well, Nancy Pelosi, who's the Democrat Speaker of the House, and the top Democrat in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, they have very much welcomed this speech by President-elect Biden and this proposal. They released a joint statement saying that it's the right approach. This package is pretty much expected to pass through the House of Representatives fairly easily because, of course, that's controlled by the Democrats, and then it needs a simple majority to pass in the Senate. Now, of course, with those 50 Democrat senators plus the incoming Vice President Kamala Harris having that casting vote, that does equal 51 and a majority for this legislation. But of course that means that it would only take one Democratic senator to sort of hold back their vote, to demand changes to it for this legislation to be held up. So we could see somebody on the left of the party, somebody like Senator Bernie Sanders, or someone from the more conservative wing of the party, somebody like Senator Joe Manchin, holding back their vote until they get a specific change to this proposed legislation.
Well, we'll certainly be watching. Many thanks, Giles, for that update. Of course, that's Giles Gibson joining us in Washington. Meanwhile, the United States has blacklisted another 9 Chinese corporations. They include China's plane maker, Comac, and smartphone maker, Xiaomi, for alleged links to China's military. Now, Xiaomi has denied any military links. The companies have been subjected to a November executive order, which restricts American investors from buying shares or securities in these companies. At least 35 firms have been placed on that blacklist, including energy giant National Offshore Oil Corporation and chip maker SMIC. Now, China weighs in about the Pentagon's move. Take a look.
The Trump administration has repeatedly overgeneralized the concept of national security, abused state power, and cracked down on Chinese companies for no reason. China is firmly opposed to that. U.S. military and civilian integration can be traced back to times before the First World War. The U.S. government has always been the main driver of military-civilian integration. Many large U.S. multinational companies are themselves military-civilian integration entities. The measures introduced by the Trump administration once again demonstrate what unilateralism and double standards are. China will take the necessary measures to resolutely safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of its companies, and support them in safeguarding their own rights and interests in accordance with the law.
Now, of course, the US and China have been locked in a tech battle over the last year, one that has expanded to even include a social media app. Here's a recap of what's happened so far.
All they talked about is TikTok, 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 TikTok.
TikTok is very successful. It does tremendous business in the United States.
We're looking at TikTok. We may be banning TikTok.
President Trump issued 2 executive orders on August 6, banning transactions with China's Tencent and ByteDance in 45 days on security concerns.
We have to have the total security from China.
ByteDance is the parent company of short video sharing app TikTok, while Tencent owns the social media app WeChat. Those popular apps must switch to American ownership to keep operating in the U.S.
We are looking at a lot of alternatives with respect to TikTok.
Whether it's Microsoft or somebody else.
Walmart is going to buy it along with Oracle. I think it's going to be a fantastic deal.
But so far, no deal at all. The Microsoft bid was turned down. Oracle and Walmart are still waiting for answers from U.S. regulators. Their proposal, according to ByteDance, was to take only 20% shares in a new venture called TikTok Global instead of a buyout. In fact, TikTok and WeChat were neither sold nor banned even after their reprieves expired.
U.S. District Court Judge Carl Nichols put a pause on the Trump administration's move, granting TikTok an injunction it had filed against the order.
The same thing happened for WeChat. A North Carolina judge believed there was hardly any evidence that a ban on WeChat would address U.S. national security concerns. However, Huawei didn't get so lucky. After fighting for nearly 2 years, the Chinese telecom giant was officially cut off from all of its core chip suppliers on September 15th.
Washington claims, without offering evidence, that the company's equipment could be used for spying. And these latest restrictions have been applied to stop Huawei getting around existing sanctions by sourcing its components from third parties.
To preserve the Honor smartphone line, Huawei sold the entire unit to another Chinese IT company in 2 months. The tech war did not stop there. The Trump administration added dozens of Chinese tech companies to its entity list, including chipmaker SMIC and drone manufacturer DJI. The U.S. government has also appealed the judge's order blocking restrictions on TikTok. Some say the moves are just the outgoing president's last attempt to cement his legacy as a hardliner against China.
Well, let's head over to the UK now. Official data shows that its economy slumped 2.6% in November, off the back of the government's tough COVID-19 restrictions. Now, the drop followed 6 months of consecutive rises. The Office for National Statistics said that output in November was 8.5% below pre-pandemic levels. England was under partial lockdown in November as authorities raced to curb a spike in infections. There were also restrictions in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Meanwhile, the UK lockdown is essential for the nation's battle against the COVID-19 pandemic, but the move has rattled its post-Brexit economy. Here's CGTN's Andrew Wilson reporting.
The UK economy took another hit as airline EasyJet announced it was grounding its entire fleet for at least 2 months. With over half of its 9,000 staff now stood down for that period, final flights became emotional moments on board.
I'd just like to say thank you. You have been a great crowd to have on board today. And now if I could ask you all to give yourselves, the crew and the flight deck one last clap and cheer. Thank you.
Cabin crew from EasyJet and other airlines are already being invited to retrain as support staff for the emergency hospitals being converted in the UK's major cities. The London centre should open this week with 500 beds, rising soon to 4,000. Inside Downing Street, the Prime Minister has been running cabinet meetings from self-isolation, and his special advisor Dominic Cummings is now said to have tested positive for coronavirus. But there are plenty of ministers and experts to continue the daily briefings.
What I've said recently is that we expect this to get worse over the next couple of weeks because there's a lag phase between getting the disease and people turning up in hospital. So we would expect to see a continuation of this at least over 2 or 3 weeks, then a stabilisation and a gradual decrease thereafter. The number of hospital admissions, to repeat, has gone up roughly the same amount each day, suggesting that we're not on a fast acceleration at the moment.
The priorities remain testing and safety equipment for medics on the front lines. A new respirator shown here in trials produced by a Mercedes Formula One University College London joint venture has been approved for use in the UK.
I sincerely think it may actually save many lives by preventing patients from needing to go onto a ventilator and again saving that vital resource for the very, very severely ill.
But on testing for the virus, the signals remain mixed. This car park south of London is seeing more business, but the UK is still falling short of targets without a clear explanation from the government. In Peru, British tourists line up to be shipped home on 2 charter flights organised by the Foreign Office from the capital Lima. Thousands of holidaymakers were trapped after the country closed down hotels, restaurants and the international airport. The UK lockdown may be essential for the nation's health, but the economic picture is getting bleaker. One forecaster is now predicting a 15% contraction in GDP in 2020's second quarter, the deepest recession since the financial crisis. Given the measures, however, this is hardly a surprise, and the public advice remains the same, for people to stay at home. Andrew Wilson, CGTN, Oxford, UK.
And heading to Germany now, while economic data from the country wasn't as bad as expected, some analysts still predict a slow start to 2021. Here's Ryan Thompson explaining.
In downtown Frankfurt, traffic is light. Most shops are shuttered and corporate office towers sit empty. For the few businesses that still have their lights on, they are fighting for their survival.
At the moment, it's very difficult for us. We're running half, maybe even 30%. And it's going to last. It's going to be like this for many months, not just 1 month.
Europe's biggest economy has taken a hit amid the pandemic, but a doomsday contraction that some economists once feared has so far held off. New figures from Germany's Federal Statistical Office suggest the economy shrunk by only 5% in 2020, despite a deep recession that was seen as early as May.
Our economic health in Germany in 2020 was shaped by the coronavirus pandemic. The crisis has pushed the German economy to fall into recession. It's the end of a 10-year growth phase.
The hit is less severe than the one seen during the 2009 financial crisis, and it's expected to be one of the smallest contractions in Europe. Other EU countries like France and Italy are projected to see their GDP shrink by nearly 10%. Experts point to Germany's resilient manufacturing arm as key to recovering from the springtime stoppage.
They have learned there is a huge crisis. They have learned that in spring, and they have also learned this will not end quickly. It will stay for the time being. So they have set up task forces, and also I think they have adjusted production lines, delivery lines. There are other corona-sensitive industries, particularly in the services sector. They were not able to do or to adjust like that.
Many of these businesses have held on, thanks to government rescue funds and stimulus measures that were enacted to ease the shock of the pandemic. And looking to 2021, many economists are predicting growth, but the speed of the recovery remains uncertain. Chancellor Angela Merkel has suggested that the current lockdown could remain in place as long as April, meaning that many businesses will have to remain as they are at a standstill. Ryan Thompson, CGTN, Frankfurt.
And moving on, the pandemic has forced the world's largest consumer tech show, the CES, to go completely virtual this year. One big trend emerging from the show is technology that helps us to stay healthy in these socially distanced times. Here's CGTN's Mark New with more.
At CES, tech companies take on the challenge of innovating to keep people safe during the pandemic. Chinese company Ubatech Robotics unveiled the Adabot, which can be used to help disinfect everything from schools to businesses.
It's only a matter of time before people will start returning to the office to do their work. And as rooms fill up and people begin touching all the different devices and equipment, you may want to have something that ensures your stuff is germ-free.
The company Targus is targeting the office with this ultraviolet C disinfection light for the work desk. All the items here get disinfected without harming the worker.
How this is safe is it has motion sensors. So the light will come on automatically. It will shine on the area here and disinfect. But if any motion happens in that area, like I am right now with my hands, it automatically shuts off. So there's really no practical way to be exposed to the UVC light in a normal situation.
Even gaming hardware company Razer took aim at the pandemic by introducing Project Hazel. This futuristic-looking mask is an N95 respirator with active ventilation that prevents carbon dioxide buildup.
Most designs cover the face and muffle your speech. Our smart mask has a clear, transparent design, which makes communicating easier, as others can now see you speak and pick up your facial cues. Thanks to a built-in mic and amplifier combo, our patent-pending voice amp technology ensures your speech isn't muffled.
Other technology focused on connectivity without spreading germs. This video doorbell from Alarm.com is touchless. Instead of pressing it, visitors activate it by stepping on the doormat.
Thanks, you can leave them right there.
And finally, plumbing product company Kohler got into the Cleanliness Act by unveiling a hands-free toilet.
Introducing our touchless toilets. The ability to simply wave your hand over the trip lever to activate that flushing experience.
One more device making everyday experiences as hygienic as possible. Mark New, CGTN, San Francisco.
And shifting focus now, here's a quick look at the commodity markets today. Oil prices declining from a 10-month high as we saw the dollar strengthening, taking the steam out of a recent rally. Now, investors are also assessing what impact a potential U.S. stimulus package will have on driving fuel demand higher going forward. Meanwhile, gold prices holding steady today. It is trapped between pressure from a firmer dollar and support from coronavirus lockdowns in Europe, also a dovish policy from the U.S. Fed. Well, let's head into a quick break now, still to come. Car makeovers gain popularity in Nigeria and mechanics are going all out.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've been Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Automobile technicians in Nigeria are taking car makeovers to a whole new level. Inspired by the Pimp My Ride entertainment series, car enthusiasts have embraced the service that transforms even the most rundown jalopy. And as CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam now reports, the rising demand in the business is driving large numbers of youths to learn the craft and set up their own body shops.
This SUV is undergoing a final phase of upgrade at this auto shop in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. The modern garage is a one-stop shop for all kinds of automobile services, from repairs to maintenance and detailing. But a team of young technicians here are changing the scene of traditional auto shop services. They pimp accidented, rusty or old vehicles and make them roadworthy and admirable again.
We take in their vehicles and change some body parts and some interior parts of the vehicle as well to match the model year that the customer is expecting the car to be, and then paint the car and do the general body work and deliver a car that looks like it has been bought brand new from the market to the customer at minimal cost. The front and rear bumpers, the headlights, the fenders, the back lights as well.
Most Nigerians love cars, but a greater majority cannot afford the latest versions of their choice vehicles. That's why the option of having their old ones converted with features of the new editions is an appealing idea. This has made the car pimping business a lucrative one.
As for instance, a Toyota Prado 2012. We want to convert it to a 2018 Toyota Prado. Well, at Autospar, we'll do it for you at the rate of 5 million or thereabout, because there is a lot of things that need to be changed. Spend nothing less than 4.3, 4, 5 thereabout. So minimum, maybe 400,000 gain on the pimping.
The garage also offers free internship to Nigerian youths and students interested in car pimping business.
We have those kind of programs running here, and the best thing about this here is that we students and other people that want to come and learn this craft, we don't charge them a fee. We just need their seriousness and their dedication and their commitment to learning this.
It looks like fun work, but finding quality vehicle parts is one of the greatest challenges here. Clients' expectations, too, may be higher than their budget. But despite the challenges, the team here believes there's a whole new sector to discover and harness in the car pimping business. Kelechi Mekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
And before we leave you today, here's a quick look at Africa's currencies. South Africa's rand weakening early on Friday in line with other emerging market currencies, as of course the dollar firmed up on global markets. Now the rand has mainly taken its cue from global factors. It has shrugged off poor local manufacturing data that showed the sector was still stuck in a rut in November. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.